So we got Evan Hallgarth here for the very first podcast. He's slightly nervous, but we'll get through this. You know, a lot of small farmers, they're not overly open about this, but so you've been farming for how long now?
4 years now.
4 years. So about how many acres you do, or is that top secret information? You
Yeah,
can't
we,
let
we
anybody
can't
know that.
disclose that. It's top secret.
It's somewhere around 9,000,
You
right?
might be overshooting a little bit there, but yeah,
Overshooting
we'll
by
we'll, we'll
about
call it that.
8,500 acres.
About 7,000.
Oh, 7,000.
Yeah,
My bad.
yeah.
So, you got any advice to small farmers on how to get started?
I would say getting started. Definitely want to take a look at your cash flow. Don't get too over the top in debt, and try to diversify what you're doing. And also you need to have a good job on the side to maintain your living expenses and kind of cover your day-to-day operation.
So, kind of what you're trying to say is pay for what you can pay for and try not to loan out too much.
Yes, I would say farm what you can farm comfortably within your means and just enjoy the fact that you're able to have the opportunity to farm and try not to get over your head starting out.
Right. Because I think the mistaken notion of farming is that they look at the bigger farmers and think that, oh, it must be nice that you're doing all this amount of acreage, you're making all this money, and you're in an $80,000 pickup truck. But what they don't understand is what it takes to get to that point.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work that goes into it, and I think that's one of the problems with this generation of us younger folks out here is everybody wants what their parents have now, but they fail to remember that their parents had to work their whole life to get to where they're at now.
Right. And then also, back then they could kind of start out. Um, I mean, what did your grandpa start out with? 200 acres? Was it even that?
I'm not sure of the exact number, but things were different back then. I mean, you had livestock; you could diversify that way. There's a lot of independent livestock producers, and all that's kind of gone to the wayside now. I think really to get started in today's environment, you really got to have a pretty good job with health insurance and rely on that and do your farming on the side.
Right. So essentially, you need a full time job to pay for your farming hobby
Pretty much, yeah, pretty
because
much.
farming's kind of more of a lifestyle, especially with a small amount of acreage than it is.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I've always said if I play $5 scratch offs from time to time, if I hit $1 million, I'd probably spend it all farming until I had nothing again. So, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're doing what you want to do, and you've got one trip around the sun, so you might as well spend it how
Right.
you want to spend it.
So if you want to get involved in farming, you're not going to make a whole lot of money, but you've got to enjoy that passion of actually farming
Yeah,
because you're not going to be a Jeff Bezos for a farmer. I mean,
no,
even
probably not.
even those guys doing 10,000 acres or don't have a whole lot of extra cash flow
No, I mean,
around.
at the end of the day, if it doesn't matter if you farm 1 acre or 1,000. I mean, if you're not doing it because it's what you want to do, then you don't need to be doing it.
Right. I mean, farming's already plenty hard enough that uh, you don't need all the backlash that comes toward it either. I mean, I know a lot of people push towards GMO and non-GMO and organics and everything else, but they kind of fail to see what even the guys that are doing thousands of acres that they're catching that flack over how they grow their product, but yet so many of the people in the city are detached from the fact that what it takes to grow a crop. They don't see how hard it is farming. You know, they just think that they're getting all these government subsidies and that they're buying all this acreage with it and they're making millions of dollars when in reality a lot of that goes right back into the farm.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of the profit you make does go back to the next year's inputs, fertilizer, seed. Of course, everything's up right now. Fertilizer through the roof, diesel fuel's up. I mean, inflation's really hitting pretty hard. So yeah, it's no easy walk in the park.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think um, since there's not a whole lot of people in agriculture today like there has been in the past, there's a big disconnect in society. A lot of people don't
Right.
realize where their food comes from. They don't
Yeah.
realize, um, you know, how the livestock's raised and how it ends up on their plate, and I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, farming's hard enough for you guys, not to mention on top of you have all these people that don't understand what it takes to grow the food.
Right, and they're afraid that the farmer growing the food is trying to kill them because the use of pesticides
But
or
I mean,
herbicides.
you guys eat the same food that you're growing.
Yeah,
That's kind of the
I mean I'm still here.
yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think a lot of it is just corporate companies trying to make money on advertising slogans, non-GMO or plant-based. At the end of the day, I mean, the food we produce is safe to eat, and the non-GMO and the plant-based stuff, they're just trying to make some money off of an advertising campaign.
Well, and from my understanding is a lot of the stuff that they advertise as non-GMO, that a fair amount of those crops, there is no GMO version of it to begin with.
Oh no, yeah,
So
just like
they're
there's
using it as a selling point.
yeah, it's just a selling point. That's all it is. And I mean, really, if you breed plants or different um, varieties or different things you want to see in that plant, you're that's modifying what the original plant was.
Right.
It's not like making clones or cheap and eating those.
Yeah.
Um,
But meanwhile, those same people, and I understand that they have a lot of concern about where their food comes from, and I think that's important, which is why I think it's more important for them to connect with the farmer to understand where their food comes from and why a farmer even wants to do it in the first place.
right, and
But
I'd really highly suggest that instead of buying your meat, your produce, or what have it from Walmart or Kroger, go to your local farmers market, connect with farmers at the farmers market. They're meet the person that's raising your food, ask the questions, learn about how that food is raised. As a consumer, if that's what you're concerned about, and that's the best thing you can do is go right to the source. Skip the middleman, skip the big packing plants, um, skip corporate America, and buy and shop local.
they're direct to the farmer, and they can control their own pricing, which also gives the farmer a little more flexibility, because in today's market with packing plants and everything else, it's no different than grain farming. You can't control your own price.
No, I mean it
I
really.
mean,
I was just actually reading an article today in a farm magazine where it said um, a monopoly is considered where four companies have 40% of the market share, and I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe four companies have around 80% of the market share of the packing industry. So right there is a big monopoly, and really the farmer keeps getting less and less for the product, and the middleman keeps getting more and more. And in the end, the consumer keeps getting screwed because they pass on the price increases to the consumer.
right.
So it's an ongoing problem. It's been going on for a while, and I think the best way to counteract that problem is to shop local and support your local economy.
Yeah. I mean, the best way to get away from the big corporate entities is to connect with the person that's actually producing the product.
Right,
I mean, there's no reason for that middleman to be in there other than they get rich off of it.
right. And I mean, hey, maybe you pay a little bit more per pound for your meat. Maybe you pay a little bit more for your produce. But at the end of the day, the money you spend in your community is going to stay in your community, and it's just going to help everybody out in the long run.
And the great peace of mind you have by knowing that this man or woman that is producing that product, them on a personal basis.
Right, and you're
You
you're helping support their family, their kids, and again, like I said, that money's staying local. It's not going to some
right,
corporate.
rather than going to some political campaign
Right,
like all these big companies do that pay for this legislation that helps out big companies rather than the small guy who's busting his butt on the back 40 trying to produce something.
right,
You know,
and there's a lot of there's been a lot of talk about the pack. I know we keep going back to the packing industry, but a lot of the reason why you don't see a lot of smaller packing plants, butcher shops. I know, the butcher shops have been booked, year and a half, 2 years out, um, is because there's so many government regulations on it.
Yeah.
It's not that people don't want to do that kind of work. It's the fact that there's so many government regulations. It makes a barrier to entry, and you just can't get started.
Like, what was that meme that said, I live in a free country, but I've got all the permits to prove it?
Well, I think you've actually had probably more rights in this country under British rule than you do today. I mean, hunting licenses, driver's, license, all kinds of stuff. You can go on and on.
Do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
You pay the $200 to the government in taxes. There's no such thing as really freedoms and.
I mean, look at all the regulations through agriculture you have to do.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you could even get into the ag equipment with all the emissions regulations that they have on that. I mean, that's why, small farmers, that's one of the great reasons of buying older equipment is because the emission stuff has gotten so outrageous. I mean, you look at these guys with this newer equipment and they're constantly having breakdowns because of emissions. And not only for the breakdowns, so their $300,000 combine is sitting in the middle of fall, broke down for emissions things that the government's regulating, and they can't even get their crop in. And then on top of that, they have the added expense on top of already a litany of added expenses on their equipment for emissions, when at the same time, are you getting a net zero? Are you really going to have net zero emissions?
Well, I think on the emissions, it's just a pat yourself in the back, feel good from the government. I mean, the carbon credits, the solar farms, the wind farms. It doesn't really make sense.
Well, and you bring up carbon credits. Anywhere you ask somebody that's supposed to be in the know of carbon credits, they can't give you an answer of how it's all going to work. The government keeps pushing it, and they can't even give you an answer. Like, how is this going to work? How are you going to sell it? How's this market going to work? And you can't get a straight answer. You hear one answer here, another answer there. They keep talking about it, and they keep saying it's pushing, it's going to come in. But, if the government's behind it, is it really going to be a great thing? You can see something as simple as emissions, which you've got to develop a whole industry for. You've got to have a factory. You got to have employees driving to that factory to make the emissions parts. Then you've got to, like, for instance, DEF, diesel exhaust fluid, which is a form of emission that's on equipment. So you've got to develop that diesel exhaust fluid, which is essentially urea, basically, which is extremely corrosive. So you've got to develop this whole new system to put on this piece of equipment, not including all the money that an equipment company had to spend to develop those emission systems so the engine wasn't complete junk. So you've got all that, and then you make that diesel exhaust fluid, you got to ship it in all these plastic jugs, because not everybody can do a 55-gallon drum of it. And then you got to ship all this stuff. Then on top of that, you're trying to get your crop in the fall, or even get your crop planted to begin with in the spring, and your tractor's broke down, and you've got a $500 emissions part you got to buy that the government regulates. If the government's going to regulate it, shouldn't they be the ones that pay for it?
Well, you got to remember the government also screwed up your coal and gas can.
Right.
They can't fix anything. As Reagan said, the scariest words are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." They can't do anything right. The emission stuff. Really, at the end of the day, we're just trying to pat ourselves on the back and make ourselves feel good. It doesn't do anything good for the equipment. It makes, well, if anything, it makes the pre-emission equipment worth more. So I guess that's the only good thing for the used equipment market right now.
Right, but it's also a bad thing though if you're trying to get started.
Yeah,
because you've got that overhead cost.
Yes,
now.
that, and just with the inflation right now, a lot of the used equipment is up quite a bit from what it was.
Yeah,
and
the good equipment.
Well, it's the unavailability of the new equipment which drives up the prices of the used equipment. Which it's not just in farming; it's tractors, trucks, cars, anything really right now is.
Well, and you can even see it in the antique tractors, which nobody's really using on a farm anymore anyway. It's like it's just it's a snowball effect that's affecting everything.
Right,
And
everything's going to be up right now with the inflation. But yeah, to go back on what you're saying about the emissions, I think the main thing is I think at the end of the day, uh, I think we're the same as if we have DEF in our tractors and diesel trucks, or if we don't. I mean, who really knows? I mean, you're going to tell me that you can tell me global warming exists when we've had what temperature data for the last 200 years. The same people that say the Earth is millions of years old have 200 years worth of data. Which, if you really believe that the Earth is millions of years old, you've got a very small slither of data, and you're going to base everything off of that.
well, and before we get into that whole escapade, I would challenge people if they want to understand what emissions is like for an engine and a piece of equipment or your pickup truck or whatever. Get yourself a straw and take a real deep inhale and then put that straw in your mouth and try to exhale. And that's essentially what that engine's trying to do with those emissions.
Right. Well, to simplify that, straight pipes save lives. I mean,
Yeah.
but no, it really you hit on something there. It just really puts a muzzle on your engine what it could be. I mean, these emission systems, these engines couldn't tear up a wet paper sack.
Yeah.
But no, again, it's added expense, it's added repair expense. It's just really not necessary if we would just use common sense. And I'm not saying we should burn tires in the street.
No.
And
but if you riot, it's perfectly fine.
Right? Yeah.
We'll ignore that.
If you're in a Democratic-controlled city and you want to light a dumpster on fire full of shit, I mean that's fine. But
if you're an honest farmer trying to earn $1, just enough of that dollar to keep you going for the next season, then we're going to restrict you.
Right? Yeah. It's double standard. That's like we were saying. Was it a year or two ago? With the coronavirus, everything was locked down, and we can't go to large gatherings. And I said, well, just give everybody a brick, and it'll be a riot, and it's okay.
Yeah.
But no, the emissions, it's really not necessary in my opinion. I'm not advocating that we burn tires and dump oil in the dirt, but at the same time, we have to use common sense.
Well, I mean, you care about your land. I mean,
right.
That's a thing they don't understand. Like, a smaller farmer is able to take care of their land better.
Well, I mean, if you own land, that is an investment, and your number one priority is not only taking care of that investment, but also trying to add value to that investment. The last thing a farmer wants to do is hurt the land that he's farming. I mean, that's our most precious natural resource in this country, and the last thing you want to do is do something to hurt it. I mean, I would argue that the farmer takes better care of the land than any other entity in this country.
Well, and then not only with the grain farming like you do, but also with livestock, it's the same way. You get PETA coming in telling these people that they're completely wrong with the way they raise their livestock, and livestock same way. I mean, you're not going to get any benefit of waking up in the morning and going out and beating your sows as hard as you can just because you're mad at the world.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, there's no benefit to a farmer abusing his own animals. Now, are there exceptions to some of those bigger operations that have a massive amount of head of livestock? Yeah, but there's exceptions to every rule. I mean, you're going to find somebody that's having a bad day, and that may happen. But the 99% of the farmers out there, livestock, grain, or otherwise, are not going to go out there and abuse what they've worked so hard to build because they love that lifestyle. So
right. Much. I mean, it's your investment. I mean, you've got money, you've got time invested in that livestock, and the last thing you want to see is a cow or a calf or a hog dead. I mean, you've put time and money into it, and the whole animal abuse thing. Long story short, God put us at the top of the food chain. I mean, we're going to eat them.
Something has to die in order for you to live.
Right. I want that steak. So something. But yeah, I mean, like I said, the last thing is that a farmer wants to have happen is to lose that livestock. I mean, from growing up on a farm that had cows and hogs and sheep, animal health was important. And I mean, heck, when we got home from school, you went and did your feeding, and then you had dinner. The animals ate before we did.
Right.
You take care of what you got,
and people, you should do that with your pets too. You
yeah,
should feed your pets first.
maybe your kids. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
well, we care about pets now these days more than what you do about children.
Right. Yeah, but no, I mean that the livestock health is critical. I mean, and that guy goes back to the big packing companies, and the consumer keeps paying more, the packing company keeps making more money, but the farmer's not seeing that. And
Right.
there's nothing more disheartening than putting a lot of time and money into livestock and then taking to the market and not getting anything for it.
Anyway, Evan, it's been really good talking to you. I guess it's going to wrap it up for the first podcast, and hopefully everybody enjoys it, and there's going to be more to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan, for having me.